Well, welcome back to 42nd Street Pete's Big Dumb Fun Show, we'll call it today. Um, I've had a couple requests to talk about some wrestling stuff. And there is a new show on Vice TV. It's up to, I think, 8 or 9 episodes right now, called Tales from the Territories, rather. Um, Longtime wrestling fans will know what the territories were before Vince McMahon, the WWE, gobbled everything up. So this was also, the show was co-produced by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson because his father traveled the territories. And they've covered Memphis, Florida, AWA, Canada, Stampede Promotions, Portland Wrestling, and how was the other one? They went in depth over the Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler feud, but this is not a new concept, whether you know that or not. This concept was started decades ago by RF Video, Rob Feinstein and Doug Gentry, in something they called shoot interviews with wrestlers. And what they would do is they would get a wrestler, pay him, and then videotape him talking about his career and some of the great stories that would come out. Some guys exposed the business, other guys protected the business. But I got a pile of them here. We have Ox Baker, who I talked about with Liquidators. Jim Cornette, one of the most outspoken members of the wrestling fraternity, who still has podcasts and all kinds of other stuff. Doug Gilbert, the brother of Eddie Gilbert, who was instrumental in bringing people into Japan and is still working today. Let's see, who else do we have? Barry Windham, Blackjack Mulligan's son. Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez. Kamala. I mean, you get the idea. I mean, I believe RF Video still has a website. You can download these shoot interviews, and he's still doing shoot interviews as we speak. Excuse me. Something stuck in my teeth there. But now, I watched the World Class Championship Wrestling one, where they had David Manning, Brian Adidas, Jimmy Garvin, and Kevin Von Erich there. What they didn't say there, I sort of candy-coated a lot of shit, which sort of pisses me off because World Class Wrestling was huge. It got cable exposure. It could have gone neck and neck with the WWF at that point, or WWF, whatever. Too many name changes with that outfit. But there was tragedies, there was shit going on behind the scenes, and a lot of people were left out. And a lot of stuff was unsaid during that episode. And they skirted around the fact that Playboy Gary Hart, a manager, was instrumental in training the Von Erich brothers, was instrumental in bringing Bruiser Brody and Abdullah the Butcher in as other people. Gary was tight with Fritz. Gary stayed there for a long time. Gary was the booker also. He put the matches together. And Gary has a huge pedigree in the business because he worked for the National Wrestling Alliance. He was Jim Barnett's guy. Jim Barnett had a huge amount of power in the NWA and would send Gary Hart to certain areas to overlook his interests. Like Florida, Gary spent a lot of time in Australia, and then, the mid-Atlantic area and things like that, till he wound up in Texas. And like I said, his contributions, as well as Bruiser Brody, Abdullah's, and others, have been skirted over. And the thing with Gary was that Gary wrote a book. And Gary, after writing this book, said, I told the truth, I'm out of the business, I have nothing to hide, and I don't really care what anybody says. And he basically explained the whole thing in the book and explained how him and Fritz had a falling out. Fritz wanted him gone. There was some behind-the-scenes chicanery. But what struck me was that he had a little run-in with a wrestler who was known as the Missing Link. And there was some words said about another wrestler's wife, and Gary told him, we don't say shit like that in here, shut up. So Gary said he was sitting in the locker room on a bench, you have those benches in front of the lockers where guys change, and he was going over that night's card when somebody slammed into him. And he thought it was just a bump, but all of a sudden he got slammed again, and it was the missing link, and the missing link was basically trying to beat the shit out of him. Well, Gary was a tough kid from Chicago and took no shit and pulled a razor out of his pocket and went up and he sliced and sliced and sliced and sliced the link up his face. The link ran out. This was a way to get Gary out of the picture, which eventually happened. He was phased out. And like I said, Gary Hart was involved in a horrible accident down in Florida with a small plane, which was piloted by wrestler Bobby Shane and also had other wrestlers, Mike McCord, who would become Austin Idol, and Buddy Colt on board, as well as Gary. Well, they were caught in a storm, I think it was near Tampa Bay, and the plane hit the water wing first and did a pinwheel effect, like end over end, and Gary was thrown out of the plane. Gary was terribly injured in this whole thing. Broken bones, I think he was blinded in one eye, but he managed to get Mike McCord and Buddy Colt to safety. Unfortunately, Bobby Shane was pinned in the cockpit and drowned. Took a while for Gary to heal up. Like I said, Mike McCord became Austin Idol, but had a bad foot injury. Buddy Colt, who was also a wrestler, had a bad leg injury, which basically kept him out of the ring and put him in a position where basically he became championship wrestling from Florida, Gordon Soley's color commentator man. But like I said, Gary was a tough individual. And the fact that they basically omitted him from this episode kind of sucks, because I've listened to tons of these shoot interviews over the years, and a lot of guys were from Texas and worked in the world-class area. And some of them have nothing really good to say about the Von Erichs. Jack Victory was down there for a while. And Jack basically said, as much as a lot of other guys said, that the Von Erich brothers were drugged out and all fucked up half the time, but their daddy kept things in check because their daddy was big in the community, and basically the whole community had grown up watching the Von Erich boys on TV. So his whole input when there was a meeting about, what was going to happen, he would go into the booking meeting and ask his kids how they wanted to win the matches, and they told him, I want to win with the Claw Daddy and shit like that. That's basically all he cared about. He didn't give a shit about the rest of the card. As long as his sons were put over, he was fine. So David Von Erich, 25 years old, goes to Japan and supposedly dies after a match. Well, he did die after the match. Up in his hotel room, he overdosed on booze and pills. I believe Bruiser Brody was the one who found it and might have helped to cover it up a little bit, because it just came out in the United States that basically David died after a match in Japan. Well, that was the start of the shit. Kerry had some drug problems too, and also Kerry got in a motorcycle accident where he lost basically from his knee down to he lost his fucking leg is what he lost. What they were covering up then was that he was running from the cops when he did this. He wrestled the rest of his life with a prosthetic leg, even when he was in the WWE, which basically limited him, and the guys that were working with him had to put him over. When it looked like he was going to go to jail for drug possession and all kinds of other stuff, he committed suicide. That was sort of the wake-up call for the whole Von Erich thing, because, like I said, a lot of these wrestlers, John Tatum, Jack Victory, other guys, spilled the beans on these shoot interviews, and they said Kevin was probably the worst, but Kevin's still alive. Younger brothers were pushed into this thing. Mike and Chris, they had no business being in a wrestling ring, but their old man pushed them in. And those two kids also committed suicide. And I believe that Fritz's wife eventually fucking left him because this was a joke. The legacy of World Class is that close to 50 wrestlers who worked there died. And mostly from drug overdoses and things like that. Buzz Sawyer, Mike Davis, Jeff Rates, the list goes on and on. But like I said, this thing was candy coated in this episode, which kind of pisses me off, because like I said, Gary Hart was very instrumental in putting that whole promotion together. He was the one who put that huge angle together with the Freebirds and the Von Erichs with the 6-man tags and stuff like that. And it's just fucked up, but I remember saying that, they interviewed the guys that were doing this show, and they said they were having a hard time getting certain people to sit down with each other. So there's still animosity going on. So be that as it may, the whole world class episode to me just kind of like, it had guys that definitely had an advantage of being there and definitely didn't talk about a lot of stuff that they should have talked about, because this is supposed to be Tales from the Territory. It was more like putting over how wonderful it was and what was its demise. And the demise wasn't the WWE taking it over. They were going strong. The demise was that the truth let out. And fans that, followed this stuff for years and thought the Von Erichs were, motherhood apple pie in America, found out they were anything but. They were, a bunch of drug-addicted fucking losers. And I hate to speak ill of the dead, but that's the way it was. And it's sort of like, it shits all over Gary Hart, Abdullah the Butcher, and Brody, because they were a big part of that thing. And, it's just sad. It really is. But, I've been around the business, since the Bruno days. I was hooked, years ago with George the Animal Steel and Bruno, and I went to every fucking garden show every month and went to Florida. And, eventually, every indie show I could get into, and then, was basically working in the business as security and videographer for 10 years while I was in Jersey. So I know a lot of this shit. And a lot of this shit is just that shit. I want to see what else they do, because there's a lot of other things they can cover. And Kevin Sullivan's been in 2 of them already. I'm sure he's going to be in more, because he was all over the map with this stuff. He wrestled just about for everybody. But again, I'm just sad that they just took that opportunity not to, talk about Gary Hart, who was a legend. And I see Jimmy Garvin sitting there, who he didn't age well at all. And Jimmy Garvin was one of the Freebirds too toward the end. I think somebody had left. But there was a story about that too, that there was a 6-man involving, I think it was the Midnight Express and Dr. Death Steve Williams against the Freebirds. And Garvin was trying to build himself up, and he was so roided up that he actually went swinging for the fences with a chair and fucked people up. And Dr. Death went in the back and basically beat the shit out of him after a match. So, like I said, you want to know the real stories, you get some of these from RF Video, or download the shooter interviews, because they're a lot more interesting, and they really don't pull any punches. And like I said, I don't think he's selling physical media anymore, but I'm pretty sure if you go to rfvideo.com, you can download the stuff. So that's my episode for today. One of our viewers wanted me to talk about Ox Baker and my encounters with the Sheik and things like that, but I'll do that one down the road. Well, plenty of time for everything. So until next episode, stay safe. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for telling your friends, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Oh, and the Black Friday sale's still going on strong. The only thing I'm sold out of is Sadist of Notre Dame and Dr. Butcher MD, but everything else is still in stock. So if you're so inclined, give me a shout. You can email me at grindhousepurgatory@gmail.com, and I'll tell you what I got left and where to send the PayPal payment. So until then, I thank you, and again, stay safe, and we'll catch you on the flip side.